that's at the center of every single part of allegedly empty space. There's nothing empty about it. That's why you can have free energy, because the farther down you go into the quantum, there's tons of energy down there. Everywhere. So here is the Merkaba. This is what people like Drunvalo Melchizedek and others have said is what your energy body actually looks like. Well, this was before that study came out last December. So now we got a whole new way of looking at things, and it extends directly into the essence of biology. Because what is biology? Biology is an emanation of that geometry, isn't it? Because the geometry made everything. Therefore, life must be part of the geometry as well. Because we are alive, life is here on Earth, it's like simple axiomatic logic, right? Life exists somewhere, therefore life must be part of the mandala. Life must be part of the seed of cosmos. It must be, has to be. Well, guess what? Right before the big 2012 turning point, this Nobel Prize-winning scientist, Dr. Luc Montagnier, proved that light is an emanation of quantum information, and that light, in turn, creates biological life. So biological life, then, quid pro quo, biological life is an emanation from the quantum space itself. Quantum space makes biological life. Any scientist who can stare at you, get ready for the slide here, any scientist who can stare at you condescendingly over the top of his glasses like you see in this slide, you know that he's onto something. He's got all these test tubes and stuff around him. I mean, this guy's hip. He's cool. He's probably got a pocket protector outside of the frame that you can't see. So what is he saying here? He said that DNA can electromagnetically teleport itself. Now, that's a misleading term because we'll explain in a minute what he actually did. And it involved 2 glasses of water, or in this case, 2 test tubes of water. That's all it is. Except that one of the test tubes has DNA in it and the other one doesn't. So this is how the experiment gets started. Check this out. This is totally crazy. You'd start with 2 hermetically sealed tubes of water. One of the tubes has trace amounts of DNA floating around inside, and it's important that there's not very many. It's just a little bit. If you got too much, it doesn't work. The other tube is pure, clean, empty water, and they're capped off, they're hermetically sealed, there's no direct interaction between them, no chemicals can be exchanged or anything. So if you got DNA, if you got life in one tube and no life in the other tube, then there should never be any life that appears in the tube that's just got plain water. Then the only other thing he does is he wraps a coil around the tubes. And he electrifies them with 7 hertz, which is this basic frequency of Earth called Schumann resonance, the basic electromagnetism that surrounds us. And you cook it like that for 18 hours, just let them sit there side by side, and then, lo and behold, the water molecules in the second tube, simple hydrogen and oxygen, that's all it is, right? H2O? It's not H2O anymore. It becomes DNA in 18 frickin' hours. A Nobel Prize-winning scientist said this. Therefore, you have to accept that DNA is a quantum effect. DNA is a precipitate of the universe. And what did I say? The universe is a hologram. The hologram starts out as a Merkaba. The Merkaba is at the center of every point in space and every location in time. This thing keeps getting stuck on my thumb. What's up with that? Let's put it over here. I got to be able to gesticulate with freedom and verve and pizzazz. Can't be catching it. It's like a time loop, right? It's my time loop. Okay, but it goes on from there. So this original core of the universe that's making all of space and time, it's making life. Well, DNA is not all that you need for life. You need proteins. So life forms are arranging spontaneously because the same geometry, as it turns out, does apply to proteins as well, and that's what all life is made out of, is protein. How does that work? Well, here's your DNA molecule, and there's all kinds of cool sacred geometry with the DNA molecule that you can watch on my show on GaiaM TV. I don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to go into it right now. But let's just look at the geometry for a moment of how the molecules fit together. What do you see there? Hexagons and pentagons, 6-sided, 5-sided geometry. Well, that's one clue, but it goes a lot deeper than that. And this discovery was made by Dr. Mark White, who has a website, codefun.com. Don't ask me why he called it that, but that's what he called it. He builds toys of this, actually. That's part of it. This is his mapping of the DNA molecule, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but what he said was the DNA wraps over the surface of the dodeck. Now, what did you remember that shape, right? What did I say that shape was made by? Is that a solid Tinker toy? No. I said it's a vibration. This is what fluid does in water when you vibrate it at certain frequencies. The universe is a quantum superfluid made by the original seed, which is the Merkaba, and as the Merkaba is vibrating, it creates all the other geometries, and they are actually creating matter as we know it, and they're also creating life as we know it. So here is the DNA molecule, and if you look carefully, you notice there's a green line and there's a red line. Trace the red line starting at the bottom and then go up, and what you'll notice is that the red line traces perfectly along the straight lines of the little dodecahedrons that are stacked up like a totem pole. You see that? Can everybody see that? And look at the green line. It's going to be the same thing. Look at the second dodec up from the bottom, the white one. Notice the green line is crossing right over that line. Third dodec up from the bottom, the dark gray one, the red line's crossing right over the line. That's what DNA is, folks. DNA is a quantum wave. It starts as a wave, and the wave then takes things like H2O, hydrogen and oxygen, just like in that drop of water, and it says, you get over here, you get over here, everybody organize, come on, dance, do it. And they make DNA. 18 hours is all it took to make DNA out of hydrogen and oxygen, nothing else. And this is how it's being done. The resonance pattern of the dodeck is assembling DNA out of hydrogen and oxygen in a drop of water. And that's the basis. That's the scientific proof right there. The code is written into the core of the geometry that is all around us. And that is very, very cool, because that fundamentally changes the model of what we think DNA is. DNA now becomes a crystallized form of a central universal geometry that was just discovered last October. Now we have a whole different way of looking at DNA than what we had before. And it extends directly over into protein synthesis as well. So let's look at that for a second. And you guys are staying with me. Nobody else is walking out, so my childhood narcissism needs are being well satisfied. I thank you for that. Some people are still laughing. Some people are so hypnotized right now, they're like, did he just say narcissist? Does he think he's a narcissist? You can't help it, right? You got to go out there and be a public figure. You got to sell yourself. Whatever. Let's talk about cool shit. This is boring, right? Okay, so what you got here, the square is actually it's an atom? No. My gosh, now I'm getting hypnotized. It's a cell. The outside hexagon there is yeah, right. The outside rectangle is a cell. Then the oval inside is the nucleus of the cell. Inside the nucleus we have DNA, just like it should be. The DNA exits the nucleus with messenger RNA that grabs its code, and then what does it do? You look at the bottom left there, you'll notice the amino acids, those 3 little black triangles. And then, very, very important there, notice the ribosomes. You see those 3 circles? We're going to come back to those in a minute. That's going to be, well, not a minute. It'll be more than like maybe half an hour, but you'll see what I'm talking about. The ribosomes are the primordial part of our cell. Now, there's a model called the eukaryotic model of the cell. You ever remember that one? And the idea is that the cell is actually a bunch of little critters that got together and wanted to hang out. So you got like ribosomes and mitochondria and all these little separate things that decide to shake hands and form a collective unit, which becomes the cell. And that's one of the models of how life was formed. Well, the ribosome is the most primitive part of that. That's what provides the raw energy. And it provides the raw energy to allow the amino acids to come together. So what do we have with the amino acids in the DNA molecule? We got A, C, T, and G. There's 4 of them. Now, in his model, here's what he does. It's so amazing. He says the amino acids are the 4 corners of a tetrahedron. Now, think about that for a minute, right? What's a tetrahedron again? It's got a triangular base, and it looks like a pyramid. It's the Merkaba, but it's just 1/2. It's one triangle. So you got 3 points on the bottom, 1, 2, 3 down here, and you got 1 on top. That makes 4. ACTG, his model is, holy crap, the 4 basic amino acids that build everything is a tetrahedron, and then that tetrahedron keeps spinning and rotating into different positions and aligning itself, and that's what life is made of in a greater geometry. So what he did is he looks at how all these different greater amino acids that start forming, of which there's a total of, I believe, 22. Some of them like each other, some of them don't like each other. It's just like a family reunion. If you got a big family, right? You got one group of people that always hangs out over there. You got another people down by the pond. We had this at the Waterman family reunion, my mother's side of the family. Actually, most of us got along pretty well there, but in this case, in amino acid world, not everybody likes each other. Some of them like to shake hands, some of them don't. Nobody's ever been able to figure out, until this guy came along, why that happens. But what he found was, lo and behold, you can map them all out across the surface of a dodecahedron. Now, the dodecahedron, as I said before, is a pentagonal geometry. It's a 5-sided shape that looks like a soccer ball where there's 12 corners. That's it. So that's what life is being formed by. Life is being formed by the original DNA molecule, which, remember, is made by dodecahedrons. It's a crystallization of these atoms that are forced into that pattern of DNA by this intrinsic energy field in the cosmos. Then you got the 4 basic amino acids in the DNA are the 4 corners of a tetrahedron. And it's turning around, and that's what's actually folding up to make proteins. So this is totally incredible. It has not gotten into mainstream science yet. But ultimately, what I've just showed you is you can build every type of life form, because all life forms are made out of proteins. You have about 30,000 proteins in your body. Some of the simplest forms of life, like these simple little worms, they have 20,000. So we don't have a whole lot more than the most primitive forms of life. All of the building blocks that make us who we are can be formed by geometry, geometric resonance patterns. Isn't that interesting? Especially because the whole center of the universe is that same geometry as I've been showing you. So this is like extraterrestrial physics 101. This is like the kindergarten class, just to try to get you over the hump so you can learn a little bit about the way the universe really works. Think about how different our planet would be right now if this was what you were learning in school. Instead of this ridiculous Darwinian model that said, oh, yeah, thank you. Instead of this ridiculous Darwinian model where he says, oh, you know, it's a random mutation. Well, they've taken fruit flies and they speed them up with radiation so that their birth and death rate goes way, way up, and there's lots of mutations. They've never been able to make anything but fruit flies by speeding up the mutation rate. And in fact, there's lots of other things, and I go way more into this science in the Gaim TV show, Wisdom Teachings. There's way more stuff that shows that mutations actually can be corrected by beaming in the right quantum frequencies. So the mutation doesn't do anything for you. It's a totally bogus model based on old school science that we no longer need.